The end game of an MMO. After hours or days or weeks of grinding and questing, you finally hit level cap and are ready to start playing the game. Big badass bosses with tough mechanics and amazing loot to be had. This is what the genre is all about. Or is it? Is a great endgame vital to an MMO success? Is anything before it just an obstacle to be painfully overcome? Do we even need a so-called endgame? Now hold on, wait, I know what most of you are thinking. Yes, of course it's important. Isn't that why we all play? And for many, yes, that is the case. However, in this video, I want to explore why the answer might not be as simple and straightforward as you would expect, and why MMOs are so unique in this regard. So really, what is endgame anyways? Generally, I think we believe the endgame content to be what's provided after max level to keep you engaged, that also allows you to have some form of progression for your character going forward. Sounds fair, right? This can either be in the form of more powerful gear, appearances in transmogs, or maybe just collecting in-game rarities like mounts and pets. Well, if there's an endgame, there must be an early and mid game, right? What are those? To me, early game is just when you're starting out, you're trying to get a feel not only for the game, but the way that your character plays. You're figuring out how to interact with the environment and really progress yourself in this new world. The mid game is the meat of the game, I would say, with lots of exploration and grinding while honing your skills on that character and finding your own playstyle. And with all the talk around MMOs being focused on the end game, it really seems like these portions of the games just must not be important, right? And are really a barrier to entry. But I would argue that and say that it's actually the opposite. I say this portion of the game is just as important, if not more so, than the so-called end game. But why is that the case? Who cares how good it is if no one gets to see it? Seriously, this is the same issue with people who claim a game gets good after being 50 to 100 hours in. Really? I only have to play a bad game for 50 to 100 hours before getting to the content which I may or may not actually enjoy? Sign me up. But in all seriousness, I think so much of the magic or immersion of an MMO comes from the time you spend not knowing everything and the time you spend exploring and learning while connecting and teaming up with others. I mean, have you guys ever stuck around for a maybe less than impressive endgame experience because of the connection and love you found for the game during the early and mid stages? I mean, I have, and I think that sense of, connection and caring about the game from an early stage is what creates long-lasting players, and that's what these games need. These are the same titles that usually keep people coming back over and over again, even after taking multiple breaks. Well, sure, the leveling content is dry and outdated, but the max level content is unbelievable. Just get there and I promise you'll be hooked. My mind immediately goes to one game in particular when someone says something along these lines: World of Warcraft. And before we get into it, yes, I love this game. I've played it for 15 years and it holds a special place in my heart. However, I'm not playing it these days and usually have much bigger gaps of breaks than I do actual time playing it. Why? I mean, in my opinion, WoW has the best MMO endgame. I know it's subjective, but the content offered today, I'm not really sure it's close. They always kill in that department. No matter what, they always do an amazing job with the endgame stuff. But unfortunately, the game just feels a bit soulless. And those primary RPG elements that had me hooked so many years ago have really faded into obscurity. Most of the aspects of the game that made me love it so much really aren't there anymore. The game is in one of its better expansions in recent history, and the endgame is amazing, but I'm still not playing it. And that just goes to show, at least for me, a good endgame can't carry it all the way. After a while, spamming that same content over and over again, no matter how good it is, gets repetitive and old. And I think a lot of others would agree. But here's another question for you, and this is a bit of a weird one. Does an MMO even really need a specific pool of max level and in-game content at all? No. You really don't. And don't believe me? Take a look at old school RuneScape. The game has no formal endgame content and is still doing insanely well for itself more than a decade later. With a community-driven and decided update process that is probably one of my favorite things I've ever seen implemented in a game, old school RuneScape is still killing it. Again, with no formal endgame content. How? Why? I have my thoughts and reasons, but I want to hear from you guys on this one. How can old school RuneScape and MMO with no endgame still be doing so well after all these years? And hey, I understand some games are oriented to be around endgame content. Some are about, the leveling experience. I think it is good that we have both, but it would be even better if games just could have both. You could have a great leveling experience and immersion while still having a super strong endgame. Because, I mean, can a game still do amazing without endgame? Absolutely, but it helps. All I'm saying is this: a great leveling and overall early experience with a bad pool of endgame is going to be much more well received than a game with a bad starting experience and great endgame. Nobody wants to waste their time slogging through bad content to eventually have fun anymore. I think this used to be a more widely accepted aspect of some games, and more importantly than that, endgame is not what acquires and expands a player base for any MMO. Far from it. I think this is where the genre is really struggling right now. Developers seem to be caught up in a non-existent race to make amazing max level content while leaving the early and mid-game content in the dust. And this extends to all the original and outdated content players used to have to level through back when a game was new. It doesn't matter if your new expansions and systems are designed and implemented way better than they used to be if I still have to go through the same old underwhelming content to get to it? I think this is really just a problem of developers being short-sighted and not wanting to do things to attract new MMO players, but rather poach them away from other games. Because MMOs definitely need an infusion of fresh blood to not just be only filled with jaded veterans with decades of experience under their belt. In my opinion, a great endgame in MMO should be just a great benefit to the game, just not the entire reason for the game existing in the first place. I just want to see the MMO genre thrive, and I'm not convinced that putting all the resources into endgame development that players may never see is the best way to approach it. What do you guys think? In modern MMOs, do you think there's too much emphasis put on the end game and not enough love given to the early and mid game for new players especially? Do y'all prefer the vertical progression end game of like World of Warcraft, or do you feel yourself more aligning with the horizontal progression like a Guild Wars 2? Either way, as always, I appreciate you tuning in. Give the video a like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more of me, but until next time, I'll catch you later. Take it easy. Peace.